In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World, episode 63. Andrew and Jerry celebrate Independence Day and say, God save the United States Supreme Court. I'm Andrew Langer.
The court needs saving because the progressives are coming at it. I'm Jerry Rogers.
There you go. And well, Jerry, you were going to spend a chunk of time on your Sunday show talking about this, but affairs of state took precedence over the affairs of state. You and I were both doing radio in the last couple of weeks and watched some of these decisions. It was another monumental Supreme Court term, major cases on religious liberty being decided, major cases on government operations and separation of powers. But what's interesting to me is, Jerry, is the number of very close or unanimous decisions on some of these cases. I know that surprised you as well.
Well, I mean, yes and no. If you look at this term, not just the more recent and according to the left progressives, the media, according to Hollywood and MSNBC, these provocative. Again, I don't see these cases as provocative, but we'll get into that next. But if you look at this term, similar to previous terms, nearly 90% of cases, 89% to be precise, had a mix of liberals and conservatives.
Right.
Only 8% of cases were 6-3 on the current ideological lines, i.e. The so-called 6 conservatives and 3 liberals. Only 8%, Andrew.
Right.
And less than that, only 3% of this term's cases were 5-4, where one conservative or one liberal joined the other side. My point is very simple. This is a very normal court. And what we're seeing is, even with the vast ideological differences between a Justice Jackson and a Justice Alito, we're still seeing a court that is roughly 90% of the time ruling with a mix of ideologies. And to that point, I don't have the figure in front of me, but I'll get it.
Yeah.
But a large percentage of cases were 9-0.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me because when you get those 9-0 cases, or even when you get cases that are say 7-2, there is this attack on the court as being illegitimate. Now there's a long and involved history here. And it's a long and involved modern history here. We have never seen the high court under this kind of an attack, certainly not in recent memory. I don't even think when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, I almost said federal, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had his New Deal agenda threatened by the high court. Did President FDR work overtime to delegitimize this court?
What's more, in recent modern history, the two most controversial and kind of cultural impactful Supreme Court cases, 1973's Roe v. Wade, and then the more recent Supreme Court case finding
the Dobbs case.
I was thinking of the same-sex marriage case. Prior to Dobbs, those two cases were earth-shifting in terms of traditional morals. They both of them flew in the face of popular opinion, even politically. I mean, we take for granted now that gay marriage is something that is culturally acceptable.
Right.
Just 10, 15 years ago, the vast majority of Americans were opposed to it. My goodness, in liberal California, they had voted twice to declare marriage one woman, one man for life. My point is that you did not see conservatives You did not see the Republican Party. You did not see the conservative movement talk about destroying the Supreme Court.
You know, it's interesting you bring up Prop 8, which was the California gay marriage.
What was that, 96? It was in the 90s.
Well, I think it was after that. But my point in all of this is once Prop 8 passed, you will remember that's really where we got this effort on the part of the left to intimidate people, go out and actively intimidate people who supported this. And I bring that in because that's been one of the great sea changes in how the left approaches the high court. Let me take a step back for a second, Jerry. But hold on, we'll go ahead because I want to come back to this.
But where you're going with this, I watched a documentary yesterday of Mao.
Yeah.
And I am telling you, this was not a documentary produced by conservatives. It was matter of fact history. And the Mao playbook is the same playbook being employed by today's American progressive movement.
Let's start with where the anger is here, because I think it's important. I've had a lot of time to think about this. So from the 1930s, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt essentially, again, he didn't delegitimize the court, but he certainly put pressure on the high court and talked about expanding the court, et cetera, et cetera. And the New Deal, the New Deal legislation was upheld by the Supreme Court. From that point until the mid 1990s, so roughly 60 years of time, 6 decades of time between FDR's New Deal and when the court started to find limits to federal power, there was an almost unending expansion of federal power for 60 years that brought sweeping changes, including, as Jerry brought up, Roe v. Wade. But all kinds of other pieces of all other kinds of pieces of legislation were upheld. Cases were decided, and in the 1990s there was a slight ideological shift, and the Supreme Court finally turned around and started saying, no, there are limits to federal power. And for the last 30 years, we've had only what can be really termed as a return to the center. That essentially we have a court saying, no. Go ahead.
I don't even like this terminology. It's a return to the rule of law. The court shouldn't be liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat. It should be a branch of our federal government that guarantees protection before the law and guarantees adherence to the Constitution and the rule of law.
And let me be really clear about this, because I think you are.
But I get your point.
Correct. No, and I guess you can put at it. If one point on the compass is a departure from all constitutional and socioeconomic norms, and the other point on the compass is constitutional law, this is what I'm talking about. And this is not a swing, right? We swung port side to port very, very, very extremely for 60 years. Now we're returning to the true north course here. That's the point that I'm making. And that's exactly it. It is this idea that we actually find these limits. Because remember what Jerry's saying, I just want to be really clear about something. The Supreme Court is a co-equal branch of government, equal to the other two branches. It does not legislate. It does not make up law out of whole cloth. What it does is it acts as a check on the power of the other two branches of government, so that they don't abuse their power, whether or not it's Congress enacting things that may very well be popular, but otherwise are unconstitutional, or the executive branch doing things that are not enshrined within the law or not within their power or orbit to do so. That's what the high court's role is. And that's essentially what it did last week, by the way, especially on this student loan case, which was absolutely huge. Go ahead.
Let's break all this down, because I think this is too important. I mean, I love our conversations, but they kind of roll
well, Jerry, we're thinking out loud here. So
but let me just a couple of things, right? And I want to start here. I want to reiterate these numbers. Say these numbers again. This term, 50% of all cases were unanimous.
Right.
89% of all cases were a mix of liberal conservative justices. Right. 89%. So 50% and 89%. Yes. Right. And then you had only 8% of cases were the 6-3 breakdown, and only 3% were 5-4.
Right.
My point is that this is not a rogue court. This is a very normal court. In fact, this court might represent the diversity of American
Bingo.
politics
Ding, ding.
more than the administration and the Congress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
let's
this is something. Hold on. This is something Jerry and I talked about last week, because especially in light of this affirmative action decision.
And I've been critical of the court. You know, sure. Andrew, you remember my view on the gay marriage decision was that the state should ignore it.
Right.
And the other three co-equal branches should ignore it.
Listen, I've been roundly critical of John Roberts on a number of occasions, not the least of which.
So my point is,
yes,
for our viewers who might be new, you and I have been critical of this court. I've been critical of Chief Justice Roberts, but that doesn't mean that we think the court is rogue. It doesn't mean that we think the court is somehow beneath the power, the statute, the authority, the constitutional placing of the other two branches.
Right. Well, it gets down to, John Roberts in the Obamacare decision, essentially saying that Obamacare was a tax as opposed to, a mandate, whatever. Right. I mean, I disagree with that, but I'm not out there saying that this is an illegitimate court and something needs to be done about it. That is something.
And we're not protesting outside his house.
Well, and this gets into what
intimidation.
What I'm talking about is this issue of intimidation. Now, Jerry and I had a conversation, and I think Jerry and I both agree. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jerry, but I'm going to. I think you and I both agree that this court and the mix of decisions is not emblematic that the pressure on the court is working, right? I don't think you and I both agree with that.
Well, this is interesting. I'm not sure. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, because there have been some decisions where it seems to me that the Chief Justice, is trying to massage the court's way so to deal with its public relations issues. It concerns me still.
Sure. No, I know.
So I'm sorry. I get
that, but what I'm saying is, we're not saying that Justice Kavanaugh is being not ideologically flexible, but he's coming at it from a different ideological bent than I think a lot of folks thought he was going to. Not because there's public pressure being brought on him, but because he's a man with diverse viewpoints, and he thinks deeply, and we may not agree with him on everything. That's, I guess, my point here.
I don't disagree, but I can't dismiss, though.
That's fine.
That Kavanaugh, that Roberts, these men and the others on the court, they do live in Washington, D.C. There's a reason, Andrew. There's a reason why there have been conservative members of the court who have, through their tenure, have grown more liberal. I mean, Justice Kennedy.
Sure.
Who gave us the deciding vote in the gay marriage case.
Right.
I think that the media, Washington, D.C., the cocktail circuit does have an impact on the justices.
So I get what you're saying here, but there's a different motivation. Maybe this is academic. Maybe this is, how many angels are dancing on the head of the pin. I think there is a different motivation of wanting to be liked and remembered and setting up a legacy. Again, not that there's any difference sort of from, a substantive perspective, but between that and, having protesters outside of your home and being threatened with kidnapping. This is, you see what I'm
listen. Yeah, I do, but listen, this is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Kavanaugh, his life was threatened.
Yes.
And the Department of Justice did nothing.
Right.
And so therefore, I think that the political wars, the cultural wars, are having an impact on Justice Kavanaugh.
Well, okay, so then we are in a very dangerous ground, because what I was going to say is, and I was hoping we were going to reiterate,
but I still think what you said is true. I think he is more inclusive in his thinking, diverse in his intellect than the left gave him credit. You're right about that. But that is true. But I think what I'm saying is true. These two things can be true at the same time.
Yes,
their criticism of him.
What I don't want to do is I don't want to give the left any incentive to continue in this bad behavior.
Well,
What I wish I could say, and maybe I can't say,
yeah.
what I wish I could say is, you know something, you can threaten Kavanaugh and Alito and Barrett and Thomas, and it's not going to have an impact on their voting. But you seem to say, Jerry, and maybe you're right, is that it can have an impact, which is a real problem in America. If we can intimidate these justices through this kind of protest action or endless investigations and threats of impeachment, then we're in serious trouble here.
I think we're in serious trouble.
Okay.
I think that Justice Alito, Justice Thomas, they're not caring about public opinion helps anchor the newcomers to the court.
Well, that's what I would hope. I mean, and that's exactly it. It's a situation in which one would have hoped that Kavanaugh would have, after all of these relentless attacks, that he would have said, you know something, screw this. No matter what I do, they're going to attack me. Therefore, I'm going to I'm going to vote the way I want to. Maybe he is doing that. I want to be really clear about this. Actually, Jerry, before we move that far down a field, because I want to make sure we underscore this point that you made. Because given the high court's ruling in affirmative action, it goes back to something that you and I have talked about, which is that diversity of skin color is essentially meaningless if everybody brings the same perspective and experience to the table, right? If everybody thinks the same way, it doesn't matter what someone's background is. It doesn't add anything to the mix. The whole point of having 9 justices on the Supreme Court is that they are supposed to, and I say this even though we've just seen, what did you say, Jerry, 80, how many, 50% of the cases being decided 9-0. Nevertheless, there are 50% of the cases being decided 9-0 by people with widely diverging viewpoints.
Yes.
And that's what's important. And so
that's where my hope lies.
Yes.
The fact that 50% of cases are unanimous, the fact that that 89% of the cases have a mix of liberal conservative. But here's the thing, and we haven't. I still want to go through these cases individually.
Okay, of course, absolutely.
But let me say this. I said this to you. Let me say this now. I've gone through the dissents and the opinions, and when I read Justice Jackson's dissent in the affirmative action case, the Harvard case, it's as if she's looking at a completely different set of reality. I'm not even sure if her dissent has anything to do with the case that was in front of her. And two things about that. Number one, she married a Boston Brahmin.
Yeah.
And so they have a daughter. So she's married to someone whose family has been attending Harvard since the 1700s.
Right.
And so their daughter is obviously, her skin color is black. So does Justice Jackson believe that her daughter deserves preferential treatment to get into Harvard above a white working class kid from West Virginia?
Right.
Yeah. Just in a, I know, but
see, and that's just it, right? Again, it gets down to.
But that's not helping. That's not helping. Giving access to those in need.
Let's talk about the problem with Justice Jackson's dissent in the Harvard.
Did I say that right? By the way, Brahmin, is that correct?
Boston Brahmin. Yeah, that's
okay,
true.
Very good. But you know what I'm saying.
And it's actually it's her dissent in the North Carolina case, because she did and rightfully so recuse herself.
I'm sorry.
But the point is, in the end, her dissent is focused on arguing the merits of affirmative action, which is not how it's supposed to be argued. You have to argue, right, that what is she's not supposed to litigate the merits of a policy. What she's supposed to do is litigate the merits of the law and
brilliant.
Why precedent doesn't stand because of how the court has ruled in the past on the 14th Amendment or what have you. And so her dissent is filled with all of these platitudes about sort of ignoring societal problems and cultural problems. And that's not what it's about. It's about the issue of the 14th Amendment and what the 14th Amendment means. Now, of course, we could go back and forth and sort of talk about the 14th Amendment in relation to the Voting Rights Act case, not Voting Rights Act case, but the electoral map case earlier that week, and whether or not there's hypocrisy.
Stop there for a second. Put a pin right there, because I want to mention this. So the North Carolina voting gerrymandering case, as well as the border policy case that the court also recently ruled on, Both those cases, the Biden administration progressives won those cases.
Right.
So again, how does a rogue court get something according to them so right, and then literally the next week they're rogue? They're
that, especially within the 3 days of it, right? I mean, that's the thing that gets me is you get on a Tuesday the ruling in this North Carolina case. And by the way, you know something? Listen, I know the chairman of the North Carolina Republican Party, who's now the general counsel of the RNC, is a very old friend of mine, Michael Watley, and he came on when I was filling in for Tony Katz, and Michael gave a great impassioned defense for the policy. In the end, I think the court ruled correctly on this, because when you're talking about federal elections, obviously federal courts have a thing to say about federal elections, and you know, it's the state legislature does not have supreme dominion over this. Somebody is going to come in there and has to, again, be a check on that power.
Even if you disagreed, even if Watley disagrees, no one is calling from the right pack the court.
And by the way, this is my point.
The court.
This is my point.
Impeach the justices.
This is my point in the end here is that this, I think, to me, to toot my own horn, demonstrates that we can call balls and strikes here. You know, but it's an agreement that I'm disappointed in, but I understand why they did it.
It is plain. It is plain, Andrew, that the Democrats do not care about policy, the rule of law, the Constitution. They are not tethered to the traditions and the principles of our founding. They are tethered to power. And let me just give you an example. So talking about the so we talked a little bit now about the affirmative action case,
right?
And by the way, before I go on to the student loan case and Chuck Schumer's bizarre criticism of it.
Sure.
Before we go there, the affirmative action case. Remember, the court didn't rule against affirmative action.
Exactly. The
court ruled against subjective standards. So you can have.
They ruled against subjective standards that served to elevate one group of people over another group of people.
Yes, but they did not. Right. But they did. The court did not rule that that other considerations, i.e., diversity, should not be considered in college admissions. So Vox magazine had a piece that made this argument that, hey, the court didn't shut the door. It just we have to implement affirmative action differently. In the New York Sun today or yesterday, there's a piece that talks about how the court did not address, from a conservative point of view, the court did not address the real problem of affirmative action, because Harvard, right the moment the decision was released, Harvard released that they were going to implement its policy in a different way.
Right.
So Justice Jackson and others saying that this ruling or these rulings on affirmative action are rolling back civil rights or rolling back the Civil Rights Act of 1964, to say that this is shrill is to not give a good definition of shrill. It is complete nonsense, which now connects it to the student loan case.
Yes,
because Schumer's response to it.
And I want to get to the president's response on it, but go ahead and talk about it.
But it was disappointing and cruel.
Yes. And
the reason why Schumer called it disappointing and cruel is because these students deserve, these 43 million students deserve this, was it $500 billion?
It depends on whose numbers you use. Right?
So
let's say anywhere between 400 billion and $1 trillion, depending on the timing and yes.
But and this is where Maoism comes in. It seems to me, and you read Schumer's comments, he doesn't want the legislature to legislate,
right?
Because we can go in and cancel this student loan debt if the Congress acts. But Schumer is saying we don't want to act. We want the president to govern independent and above the legislature. That's insanity.
Well, it's fascism. I mean, or it's authoritarianism in the end. It's a profound disrespect for the rule of law. But hold on, Jerry. But on this gets into what the president himself said.
Yeah,
which to me was the most disturbing. which is the president saying that the Supreme Court should not have the final word on this. Now, he could be saying that he thinks Congress needs to act, but I don't think that's what he was saying.
But however, and this is interesting because the on this topic, on this issue of student loan forgiveness, he is correct. The Congress can be the last word.
No. But he then turned around and essentially issued a series of executive orders and started down the road of a rulemaking
against untethered
Department of Education,
untethered from the law, untethered because from the separation of powers.
We don't do whataboutism here, but we do like to present the contra thesis on this, which is to say,
there's nothing wrong with whataboutism, by the way.
What if Donald Trump went down this road? What if the Supreme Court had announced, right, that Donald Trump can't build the wall and make Mexico pay for it, right? That they said that it's not within the president's power to build the wall, and then the president turned around and said, "Well, we're going to build the wall anyway." Well, that would be, that would be a form of authoritarianism. That would be the wrong thing to do. Sorry, go ahead. You were going to say something. It looks like.
No, but and again, this is just proof. You and I talked about this during the 2016 election,
right?
And thereafter, that the other side was just showing us plainly what they wanted to do.
Right.
Right now, the progressives are showing us how they want to govern. It is Maoism. It's authoritarianism. It
goes back to sorry, go ahead.
The fury we're seeing. AOC is apoplectic.
Does this, Jerry? Does this go back to? Does it start? I mean, does it start with Chief Justice Rehnquist presiding over Bill Clinton's impeachment? Is it the Supreme Court's decision in Bush v. Gore that sort of kicked this off? Because before 2016, before Trump, you had President Obama standing in the
I never make a note when we do our shows.
Yeah.
The only note I have here, State of the Union, Barack Obama.
State of the Union, Barack Obama.
That's the president. That was the declaration. That was the declaration of war.
But do you think that was the declaration of war after about a dozen years of them festering over Bush v. Gore?
This is very interesting. Let's dig here a little bit. Number one, for those who don't know, the former President Barack Obama, in a State of the Union address,
see if I can find this clip.
He chided, he criticized in an unprecedented way. Had never been done before by a president, with the Supreme Court sitting there, not able to applaud or to jeer. And he chastised the court. That was the mark of the beginning of the left's outward war against the court. However, Andrew makes a very good point. We talk about how Trump broke the mind of the left. And again, we're not here to defend Trump, his personality, his campaigning in 2020, his campaigning today. But the fact of the matter is that he was a legitimate president in 2016, and they tried to make him something that was illegitimate. And we think, Trump broke their mind. Really, what broke the left's mind,
I think you're right,
was the 2000 election and the Supreme Court coming in and ruling in favor of George W. Bush. That was it. That broke their mind, because up to that point, the left had successfully used the court and the courts to implement their unpopular their programs. The court was their ally, and here. And in this one instance, the court was not.
Here, Jerry, I want to play the video, but yeah.
Sure. And they could not handle it. And we would have seen all-out war then, except for 9/11.
All right, so you're right. Oh, I think you're absolutely true. So this is from 2010. This is after actually this is before Obamacare passed, because Obamacare passed in March of 2010, I believe. Here is President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden behind him. Let me share this. It's entitled "Justice Grimaces" as Obama criticizes the court. But anyway,
to separation of powers. Last week, the Supreme Court reversed a century of law that I believe will open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections.
Now, for those who can't see this, the justices are sitting there.
Yes,
they
now,
are.
Now, I will say Sam Alito did shake his head,
right?
But go ahead.
They are sitting there as the vice president, as the Speaker of the House, as the president, and as Democratic congressmen surrounding them.
Yes,
all stand. This is an example of political intimidation.
Right.
This was the president declaring war on the legitimacy of the court. By the way, the president is wrong on the merit. But
of course he is. Well,
he's wrong on the facts. But regardless of that, this is the moment, Andrew. This is the moment that progressives outwardly began to war against the legitimacy of the court.
I'm going to stop the share because I think you're right. I think the point is made, Jerry. Because I want to talk about this. Political movements, especially political movements on the left, and here's why. Because political movements on the left are very hierarchical. They are non-individualistic. They're very communitarian, right? So you take your orders from the top and you move monolithically. It's something Jerry and I have talked about before.
And also, sometimes those orders don't have to be explicit.
Oh, of course not.
When you know what the top wants. This is why the left is so wonderfully organized.
Yes.
Because, for instance, the IRS case, no one had to tell the IRS to block and to discriminate against center-right organizations. Though
I still think they did, but go ahead.
But they didn't need it because they knew this is what Obama wanted. But this is the brilliance of their side.
But the danger, of course, is because when they don't communicate, people look at what Barack Obama, right? Remember, Barack Obama, massive cult of personality surrounding Barack Obama. He was the president of cool. And people look to him and they look to him for leadership. And when President Obama gets up there, and we're talking a year. So this is right, because I don't remember if he did a 2009 State of the Union, but this is 2010. And the president gets up there and he makes a signal year one into the cult of Barack Obama and says, it is okay to criticize the court in this way. And
it was worse
on in this way.
But it was worse than that. It wasn't criticizing the court. You can criticize the court.
Oh, yes,
it was worse than that. It was calling into question the legitimacy of the court. Yes. And again, ironically, think about this. So one of these provocative cases where we're seeing the fury from the left over the Supreme Court is the student loan case. By the way, it was Barack Obama who federalized the student loan process. Listen, I had student loans, Andrew.
Yes.
And I don't exactly know the mechanism by which we did this, but I'm sure it was through the banks. And I paid my student loan back.
Right.
Then in the 2000s, the feds took over and literally made money cheap.
Yes.
And so therefore you got students who probably couldn't or shouldn't have deserved the loan getting loans. And then you saw universities jack up tuition prices because money was cheap. Right. So the student loan crisis is the product of Barack Obama.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, right? Because again, in deciding on this student loan case, nobody needed to turn around and nobody on the prevailing side needed to turn around and give an extensive discussion of why federalizing student loans drove up tuitions, and therefore this is a problem of the federal government's own creating in order to get at the merits of the case, which all have to do with what is the government allowed to do? Unlike, again, Justice Jackson's dissent.
And again, so all right. So here, the student loan case, everyone knew it was unconstitutional. Right. In fact, Chief Justice Roberts used Nancy Pelosi's own words in his opinion.
Which, by the way, makes Chuck Schumer's comments about it, even more ridiculous, given how close they are.
But even the White House general counsel, before Biden issued the executive order, told him it would be ruled unconstitutional.
Right.
And then this second play they're doing now, he's already been told it's unconstitutional. He's going to go forward anyway, because it's not about the law. It's not about helping children, helping students, helping families. It's about power.
And let me be really clear what Jerry means by that in terms of power, because Jerry's not saying that there is something inherently bad about the federal government wanting to make it so that it's easier for students to pay for college.
No, in fact, I'll comment on that after your comment.
But what Jerry's saying is that they are using the giveaway of student loan payments in order to get votes so that they can remain in power and do all of the other really horrible, bad things.
Exactly right.
It is. Hold on real quick. Yeah. It is a prime example of what Margaret Thatcher said, which is when you rob Peter to pay Paul, you will always have the support of Paul.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just two things to kind of round this out. Number one,
and I do want to say something about cruelty.
The Democratic Party, the progressive movement, has become completely transactional.
Right.
Again, just kind of broaden this out a little bit so I can explain. It used to be that folks needed food stamps, SNAP, or Section 8 housing, or welfare, or wraparound services at schools, etc. All of these very important social safety net. We believe in it. We are a democracy. We have to help our neighbors, and the government has a role to play there. Period. That's it. We agree with. No one's talking about undoing welfare, undoing Medicaid. However, these are transitional. These shouldn't be cultural.
Right.
Someone should not aspire to live in Section 8 housing and have Medicaid as their health insurance. However, the progressives, and rapidly over the last 20 years since Obama, they have made this into a transaction.
Yes.
You vote for me and you get your Obama phone.
You know what's funny? It's funny, real quick, because I want to come back to the cruelty issue. Over the weekend, now, one of my guilty pleasures on a Saturday morning, now that I'm no longer doing Saturday morning radio, Jerry, I have the guilty pleasure of being able to watch Saturday morning cartoons. and on MeTV from 7 to 8 a.m., they play Popeye cartoons. It used to be Popeye and Pink Panther.
I love Popeye.
And this past weekend, I like some Popeye, but this past weekend, it was all patriotic Popeye cartoons. So like all of the World War II era Popeye cartoons when he was serving in the Navy.
Yep.
All came with a disclaimer, by the way, about racism, because apparently it was bad that we made fun of the Japanese during World War II. But the point is that there was one in which Bluto and Popeye are running against each other for president. And both of them are promising, Popeye is promising 2 cans of spinach for every household, and Bluto is promising every man cigars if they vote for him. And it seems to be emblematic of your example here of the transactional nature. You vote for me and you'll get a cigar from me. But anyway, here's my point about cruelty. Chuck Schumer can go down this road of how cruel this is to the various students who took out loans knowing that they were going to have to pay them back. What is cruel is forcing a working family that's scrimped and saved to pay for their kids to go to college, or, scrimped and saved in other ways, to then be forced to subsidize some privileged, I'm going to say it, some privileged jackass who doesn't want to pay his student loan payments. Oh, and by the way, racked up even more credit card debt when their student loan payments were paused during the pandemic. I'm sorry.
You're right. Look,
one more thing here. By the way, I'll say this again. For those folks trying to make a comparison to this and the folks who took out PPP loans.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
When the government shuts down your business, the government owes you compensation for doing that. That's just the way it works.
Also,
so you break it, you buy it. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, a couple of things. The PPP loan process, it was debated and passed through Congress.
It's an excellent point. True.
Signed into law by the president. And a stipulation of these PPP loans was if you hire or keep employment your workers, you will be given loan forgiveness. It was actually, it was in the contract. It was in the agreement. Yes. So if my business was closed, I reopened, or I stayed open, and I retained my 5 employees, and I took out a $100,000 in PPP loans. Yeah, I got that $100,000 back because I did what I promised I would do, and you promised to forgive my loan. Again,
Right.
my point is they are not connected. But
Yes.
go back to the cruelty issue.
Yes.
Chuck Schumer, the majority leader in the Senate, could vote on some kind of federal loan
100%.
And here's the thing. AOC and the progressives would say, well, it would never pass. Well, they're correct. It won't pass because a vast majority of Americans are against it.
Right.
Now, someone would say, who's listening, well, Jerry, then that really defeats your power argument. No, remember, the Democrats are a coalition. They just need a sliver of those who feel that, hey, give me my student loan debt and I'll vote for you. They don't need all those votes, but they need a significant number of those votes. And this whole student loan debt forgiveness is part of that strategy. But that being said, why not make the argument anyway?
100%.
Why not try to convince those who are against you to be with you? And they could do this. And this is how they could do it. And you just said it. AOC, right? She's talking about impeaching the court members, expanding the court, ignoring the court. Why are we listening to the court? The court has no, she actually said that the court has no purpose. Why do we even need a Supreme Court? Now, someone will say to me, well, Jerry, AOC is a progressive crazy woman. No, she's not. She's the exact center of the Democratic Party right now. And, we might dismiss her at our own peril. Her arguments are their arguments.
Never dismiss what the progressives are saying to you. They are
Right.
telegraphing you.
But here's
the
argument. If I were AOC, I'd go get a Matt Gaetz. I'd go get one of the Republican crazies.
Yes.
And I would say, look, the feds took over the loan programs, and it jacked up college tuition cost. It jacked up interest rates. And there are a lot of people, yes, they should have known better. They didn't know, and they got cheap money easy. And now they're in over their heads in debt. Let's come together with a compromise. And on your side, you can chastise and correct the government for taking over the federal program. And let's give the loan program back to the private sector. On my side, let's get $20,000 worth of debt relief to these people who are in debt. And you're right. Not everyone's going to be happy with it. But that's good legislation when everyone's not happy. I think conservatives would bite the bullet on forgiving $10,000 to $20,000 worth of debt if it meant
turning it back over to that's a possibility. I mean, listen, I've gone down this road, right? This is the question that I asked those progressive students back in February about the issue of the war in Ukraine. Would you be willing to engage in an immediate program to massively expand drilling and oil refining on U.S. soil if it meant bankrupting Russia's economy and providing Ukraine with as many weapons as they can carry? And I'd say a good half of the progressives in the audience said yes, that would be worth it. The other ones said that they wouldn't.
But here's I want to make this point.
Yeah,
and you're right, and because you pushed me to this point.
Yes.
That's hard work.
Yes.
Having to make arguments and have hearings and work legislation and make your argument, that is hard work. You see, AOC wants to be on social media.
That's the problem.
She wants to be celebrity. But here's the problem. We have real issues in this country, and student loan debt is one. There is a student loan crisis. It is. Whether you're left or right, we could agree that there are people.
Well, hold on, Jerry. There's a student loan crisis, but there's a tuition rate crisis. That's really
I'm sorry. Yes, and that's all. Yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah. But here's the thing. So Greta Thunberg, am I saying that?
Yes.
The young woman who is a climate change activist. Apparently, according to many media outlets last week, she is a world leader.
Yes, she is.
All right. So, but she does nothing.
And that leader is the planet of Greta Thunberg. But go ahead.
But she does nothing of substance.
No.
She is privileged. She's elite. She has money. She is sponsored. She has celebrity, but does nothing really to change the policies or at least the reality, the science of climate change. Compare her with Norman Borlaug.
Yes.
Norman Borlaug, of course, is a scientist.
Yes, he is.
And in the 1970s, 1960s, when it was widely accepted that millions in Asia would die, millions in Africa would die because of starvation, we didn't have the wherewithal to feed. And the elites in the world were fine with people dying. Then along comes Norman Borlaug, who introduces a kind of a genetic modified wheat.
Oh, yeah.
And ends up literally saving
rice, but yeah, go ahead.
It might have been rice. It was a wheat rice or something.
Yeah, something like
regardless, it was food. It was rice.
Yes.
And you're right, it was rice. And anyway, long story short, he saved millions from starvation. Right. Actually won the Nobel Peace Prize. But see, here's the difference. Everyone knows who Greta Thunberg is.
Yes.
Precious few know who Norman Borlaug, who he is. Right. And that's because Borlaug did the work that saved lives.
Yes.
And Greta Thunberg is just a social media celebrity.
By the way, on this point, it's a very good segue, Jerry. I've got to put out a congratulations to a friend and colleague of ours for the successful strategy in this student loan case. I had him on the show last week. You want to talk about the work that was being done? We know that of the two cases that were up before the high court last week, it was a split decision. The two students who sued over this case, their case was dismissed on standing grounds, which Ilya Shapiro, a constitutional scholar, we've had him on this show, Ilya Shapiro will tell you that the Supreme Court's standing standards are very inscrutable. Standing means that you have a case or controversy, you have the reason to sue, that you're a real plaintiff. Phil Kerpen, our good friend Phil Kerpen, knew about this, knew that this was going to be a central problem. And he started thinking about this and conceiving of this. And he is one of the people, and I'm going to say he's the person who turned around and came up with the idea that because the states were involved in servicing these student loan payments, and they were the ones who are going to lose out on this deal, that certain states, Missouri and Nebraska especially, would be hard hit by this. And now I'm going to say, I don't remember which one it was. Nebraska didn't get their act together, but Missouri did. And it was Phil who started talking about this and starting putting the bee in the bonnet and starting meeting with legislators in those states in order to get the cases brought. So kudos to Phil Kerpen, our good friend Phil Kerpen, for that hard work. Jerry, listen, let's shift gears for a minute.
Well, I'm fine with that, but yeah. we still hadn't. I wanted to break down. We talked the affirmative action case. We talked the student loan case. Again, we have not talked the 303 case.
Well, we got to. And but by the way, not just the 303 case. I'm not giving you the finger, Jerry, but also the Groff versus the Groff case, which was the religious freedom for the postal worker case. And that one decided 9-0, which is amazing.
Right. And let me start where just how the left gets it wrong.
Yes.
And I've seen this everywhere, from lawyers.
Yes.
From members of the Congress, from media personalities, from experts who have said that LGBTQIA plus rights are now in jeopardy. It's been everywhere. We've seen in places like Slate and Salon and The Atlantic and Vox, the American Prospect and other such places, right, call into question the court's use of free speech or the First Amendment in order to block protections for LGBTQIA populations. And again, it's interesting to me. This case does nothing of the sort.
Right.
It's a very simple case where, and here it was a web designer who was asked to create content with which she disagreed strongly as a matter of faith. And so this is very standard. The government can't compel someone to compel speech. And that's all this is. This is not, this web designer cannot turn away gay and trans customers.
Yes.
That's not what this is. And and again, it's telling to me that the left, the progressives, the Democrats, they have to lie in order to make their point.
Right. And Jerry and I disagree.
This is the whole,
I know
like,
Jerry
the
and
human
I
rights
disagree
campaign,
generally. Yes. Jerry and I disagree.
once again comparing their plight to the plight of African Americans in slavery and bondage. It's complete and utter nonsense.
It's interesting, Jerry, because I think folks, Jerry and I have a tendency to disagree about this issue about accommodation. And I know what the law is, and Jerry is going to remind me of what the law is. But I have no problem with people who want to refuse people to their business. Yeah. But this is not what the decision says. So when you have folks out there saying, well, there was a meme going around, a picture of a store. I'm no longer going to allow Trump supporters in my shop because the Supreme Court says that I can. You know something? That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. It's not what the Supreme Court case said.
Right.
But something, because I got into this with Bill Penzi, the head of Penzi's Spices, a couple of years ago. But go ahead. I don't want to get too far afield.
Right. But the bottom line is this. I don't disagree with you about public accommodation laws. I just recognize that they are the law.
They are the law.
So
that's true.
Right. So if a gay person comes into my restaurant, I cannot throw them out for being gay.
Right.
And this Supreme Court decision in no way impacts that.
Right.
This is about compelled speech. This is about forcing someone. What if you are, again, just to put it into something that people might understand better? What if you are a social, social media influencer, and the government came in and said you must write that Nazis are good,
right? Or
some group said, or Facebook said, or whatever.
Let's not even go the extreme of the Nazis. Let's say that you are a progressive social influencer and someone comes to you and says, you have to start talking about how Republicans are good, or how you love Brett Kavanaugh, or how you love Justice Thomas. No, you can't compel somebody to act that way. Or, well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, but again, we don't even have to spend a lot of time on this.
I love, by the hold on, because I also love the one where on the first one, on the case about the 9-0 case about the postal worker.
Yeah,
someone writing, well, I'm an atheist. Does that mean I can take one day of the week off? To which I wrote back, well, if you're saying that atheism is a faith, then I agree with you, but unfortunately your faith doesn't have a Sabbath. So, no, you can't use that excuse. I'm sorry, because that's essentially what they're, and anyway, it gets even more complicated than that. Jerry, listen, because I know you are tight on a deadline.
Yeah.
How are you celebrating July 4th?
Oh, well, we're going to go to a minor league ball game.
Fun. That's right. You're going to the ball game tonight.
And, it's funny. Memories came up on Facebook. I think 7 years ago, we had done the same thing, and there's fireworks and the kids can run the bases and that sort of thing. So we're going to go to a minor league ball game. And then on the 4th itself, pardon me, we're going to be home. We're going to grill. We're going to be with family. I think we're going to take a ride either into the district and try to go and see some of the monuments or something. Man. But not the fireworks. We're going to come home for fireworks.
Okay.
Or we're thinking about going into Old Town Virginia, Alexandria, and going and visit some of the sites where George Washington.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Where his there's Gatsby's Tavern.
Yes.
Where he resigned his military commission. There's of course the church there and his pew where he attended church. So we're going to do something historic during the day. In the evening, we'll grill and see fireworks, and then we also every year we do some kind of patriotic reading.
Oh, fun!
I haven't picked it out yet, but some kind of reading, and sometime on the 4th, 1776, we'll be playing.
There you go. Well, so I know it is playing on TCM tomorrow night, 4th of July evening, but you can watch it obviously earlier. If you have HBO Max, it may very well be on there because they have their TCM channel there. Something, we're very low key. We have fireworks in our neighborhood. I think we're going to go watch those during the day. I'm not sure what we're going to do. We may get out on the kayaks tomorrow because we haven't done that. I've been dealing with knee issues, so I have not been out on the kayaks at all this spring. So we may wind up doing that. Just sort of taking it easy generally. By the way, something I was gonna talk a little cooking stuff. As you can see, I'm wearing this shirt. I'm going to wear my other 4th of July shirt tomorrow. I will say this much, because it just got a notification. New episode of the Lunch Hour with the Federal Newswire has dropped. Excellent. I interview President James Madison. We talk about the importance of celebrating the 4th of July. So you're going to want to go and check that out. Jerry, when are you on next?
I'm going to find that and put it up on Real Clear Policy for tomorrow to celebrate the 4th. We didn't talk about this, but I'm going to be on WBAL July 5th.
Okay.
And so at midday. So I'm going to talk about these Supreme Court cases again. We can't do it now, but there was, of course, this mass shooting, the left's term mass shooting in Baltimore City. I'll talk about that. But I'll also talk about how already the mayor and the governor and others blaming guns. Let's get guns off the streets and these sorts of things. The sanctity of gun is more important than the sanctity of life. Mayor Brandon Scott said that this morning. And I'm going to talk about very explicitly how this governor, Wes Moore, and this mayor of Baltimore City, Brandon Scott, they've done literally, again, not exaggerating to make a point, they've literally done nothing to get illegal guns off the street. They actually have opposed penalties.
And nothing to keep children out of harm's way, Jerry. That's the
nothing.
Yes.
Yep. Nothing at all.
All right, Jerry, what do you want folks to do?
Well, I mean, my goodness, I'm going to add something. Pray for your country because we need it, because the left is intent on taking it away from us. And I know that sounds extreme, but it's the truth. Their reaction to these Supreme Court cases, their fury against these cases shows the left's totalitarianism, and again, it's the truth. So find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun, stay safe, and God bless America.
God bless America.